The door hit the frame so hard the brass knocker swung twice on its own. I stood on the porch of the house I had lived in for 4 years, twins strapped to my chest in the carrier I had packed the night before without knowing why, and I listened to the knocker go still. The snow was coming down in the way it does in Harwick Falls in February. Not dramatic, not a storm, just steady and indifferent, landing on my shoulders and on the babies' bundled heads and on the welcome mat that I had bought and that still said welcome even now. I did not move for a moment. Something settled behind my sternum. Not grief, not rage, something older than either of those. Like a door inside me that had been rattling for 2 years had simply, quietly closed. That was a Thursday night. 9 days later, I sat across a table from my mother-in-law and I opened my phone. What happened between those 2 moments is the part she never thought to ask about. That was always her mistake. She decided what I was and then she stopped looking. My name is Renata Voss. I was 34 years old and I had been running a small interior design firm called Voss Studio out of a converted spare room for 6 years before I ever met Lorraine Calloway. The firm was not large. It was mine. I had built it from a single referral and a second-hand drafting table, and by the time Derek and I married, it was generating enough to matter. Not enough to impress the Calloways, but enough to matter. Derek was kind in the way that men are kind when nothing has ever required them to be anything else. He was easy to be around, quick to laugh, and constitutionally unable to hold a position in any room that contained his mother. I knew this before I married him. I told myself it was something that would shift once we had our own household, our own rhythm. I was wrong about that, but I was not wrong about him. He was not cruel. He was just weightless in places where I needed him to have mass. Lorraine Calloway was 61 years old, and she ran the family the way certain people run committees, with procedural warmth and total authority. She never raised her voice in the early years. She didn't need to. Her disapproval arrived as helpfulness. Her control came wrapped in concern. When I set up my design studio in the spare room of the house we bought together in Harwick Falls, she said, "Oh, how sweet, you're keeping yourself busy." When my client list doubled, she told Derek it was a lot of time away from the home. When I got pregnant with the twins, she called me the following morning, before Derek had even told anyone, and said she had already looked into a very good nanny service because she imagined I would want to get back to my little projects. I said thank you. I always said thank you. The twins arrived 7 weeks earlier than the due date. 2 girls, both under 5 pounds, both fine, both terrifying in their smallness. We came home after 11 days in the NICU, and I was operating on 4 hours of sleep and sheer forward momentum, and Lorraine was already at the house when we pulled into the driveway on Crestline Avenue. She had rearranged the nursery. I stood in the doorway of the room I had designed. The colors I had chosen, the shelving I had specified and installed myself on a Tuesday in October, and I looked at what she had done to it, and I said, "Thank you, Lorraine." Derek squeezed my hand. I went to feed the babies. What the Calloways understood about my contribution to that household was partial and selectively maintained. They knew I paid half the mortgage on the Harwick Falls property, $647,000 when we bought it, a number Lorraine had initially said was a stretch, until I showed Derek what my firm's revenue projections looked like over the following 18 months. They knew I managed the renovation of the kitchen and the main bathroom without a general contractor, pulling in trades I had worked with professionally, which reduced the cost significantly. They knew I worked. What they did not account for, what Lorraine specifically never acknowledged, was the way the work existed inside the house itself. The Voss Studio client list included 3 referrals that came directly from Lorraine's own social circle. I had redesigned the entryway and the sitting room at the Calloways' home on Derek's birthday 2 years earlier, as a gift, a project that took 11 weeks and that I invoiced at $0. I had absorbed, over the course of our marriage, roughly $14,380 in design hours applied to Calloway family properties and family-adjacent projects, a number I had never tracked formally until the night I sat in a hotel room in Harwick Falls with a notepad and a reason to write things down. There was also a document I had been carrying for 14 months by that point, county-stamped, filed in a folder on my laptop and in an envelope in my bag, that none of them had ever asked about. I had not offered it. No one had thought to ask. But the contribution that mattered most was not a dollar figure. It was the steadiness. The decade-long habit of competence that I brought to every room I walked into professionally, and that I quietly applied to our household too, managing schedules and vendors and decisions that Derek deferred on and Lorraine never saw because I made them look effortless. I had sourced every fixture in the kitchen remodel, coordinated 4 separate contractors across 6 weeks, and handled every permit filing myself because it was faster than explaining the process to someone else. That was the tax that certain women paid in certain families. You did the work so well that your absence of it became invisible, and your presence of it was assumed. The first time Lorraine said the word ungrateful to me, we were standing in my kitchen 6 weeks after the twins came home. She had stopped by, unannounced as she did, and found me on a work call at the kitchen table, both babies in the bassinet in the next room, audible but settled. "I heard them fussing," she said when I ended the call. "They're okay," I told her. "I checked 2 minutes ago." "You were on the phone." "A client call, yes." She set her bag on my counter and looked at me the way she always looked at me when she was about to reframe something I had done. "Renata," she said, "I just think a new mother who has been given so much ought to be a little more present." The word given sat between us. "I'm present," I said. "I only mean," she said, with the particular warmth she used for conclusions she had already reached, "that some women in your position would be a bit more grateful." I looked at her. "I am grateful," I said. She smiled and picked up her bag and said she'd see herself out. I stood at the kitchen table after she left and pressed my palm flat against the surface. The table I had refinished myself, pale oak, 22 hours of labor, and I breathed. The night of the expulsion was a Thursday, 11 days after we brought the twins home from the NICU. I was not recovered. I want to say that plainly because the Calloway's version of that night, the version they would later tell, omitted it. I was 11 days postpartum with 2 premature infants, and I had not slept more than 2 consecutive hours since the birth, and I was still moving, still functioning, still at the table with my laptop at 9 p.m. because 2 client projects did not pause for my biology. Lorraine arrived at 9:40 p.m. Derek let her in. He had not told me she was coming. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table with her coat still on, and I knew from the coat that this was not a visit. This was a proceeding. "I want to talk about the living situation," she said. I closed my laptop. "What about it?" "Derek and I have been discussing it," she said, "and we think it would be better for the girls if things were restructured." I looked at Derek. He was standing at the edge of the kitchen, his arms crossed, his eyes on the floor. "Restructured," I said. "You've been very stressed," Lorraine said. "Anyone can see that. And when a mother is stressed, the babies feel it. I think the most loving thing for everyone would be for you to take some time. Step away. Let us stabilize the home." "You're asking me to leave my house," I said. "I'm suggesting a cooling-off period," she said. "For the children's sake. This is my house, Lorraine." She tilted her head slightly. "Derek's name is on the mortgage. So is mine. Renata." Her voice stayed level. "You've been struggling. That's not a criticism. It's just the truth. And in situations like this, sometimes the most mature thing a person can do is recognize when they're not coping." "I'm coping fine," I said. "You were on a work call this afternoon," she said. "The babies were crying. They were in the room next to me and I checked them every." "This is exactly what I mean," she said, and there was something in her tone that dropped half a degree. Not anger, a kind of settled finality. This defensiveness. This inability to just hear someone who cares about you. "I hear you," I said. "Then you understand why I'm asking." "I understand what you're asking," I said. "I don't agree with it." She looked at Derek. Derek cleared his throat. "Ren," he said. "Maybe just a few days. At your sister's. Just to reset." Something in my jaw tightened. I looked at him for a long moment. "My sister lives 4 hours away," I said. "Mom could help me with the girls while you—" "Derek." I said his name once. Quietly. He stopped. I turned back to Lorraine. "I'm not leaving my house," I said. She stood up. The warmth in her voice was gone now. not replaced with cruelty, just with the flat administrative tone of someone closing a file. "Renata," she said, "you are being ungrateful. We are trying to help you, and you are making this very difficult. You have been given a home, a family, 2 beautiful children, and you sit there and you tell me no." "I sit here," I said, "and I tell you no." I said nothing. She looked at Derek. "Then I want you to leave," she said. "Take the girls and go. If you won't let us help, I cannot watch this." He did not look at me. I stood up from the table. I went to the nursery. I dressed the girls in their warmest layers, the fleece ones, the ones I had washed myself 3 times before they came home, and I put them in the carrier, and I picked up the bag I had packed 6 days earlier without knowing why I was packing it, and I walked to the front door. I opened it. The cold came in fast and flat. I stepped onto the porch. The door closed behind me. Something went still in my chest. Not anger, not yet, not anything that had a name, just the particular quiet that arrives when a decision you didn't know you'd already made finally catches up with your body. The snow fell on the welcome mat. I walked to my car. I drove to the Linden Room on Route 9 and checked in with a credit card in my name. I carried the twins upstairs in the carrier, 1 flight door at the end of the hall. I set the carrier on the bed and unstrapped them and laid them side by side on the firm center of the mattress. I took off my coat. I opened my bag and found the formula and the 2 small bottles I had packed. I fed them, one then the other, in the chair by the window. I set them down. I found my phone and opened my contacts and called my attorney. I left a voicemail. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my thumbnail into the slightly raised laminate edge of the nightstand and held it there while I waited for my heart rate to slow. I opened my laptop. I found the folder. I opened the folder. I read the document inside it twice, slowly, the way you read something you already know but need to confirm is still true. It was still true. Another pause. "So what, this is it? You made this decision alone?" "The way you made yours alone," I said. "Yes." He came home that afternoon. I had asked Claudette to be there, and she was, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea when he walked in. He looked at Clara for a long time. He did not say the things I had expected him to say, the justifications and the percentages of blame distributed across the available parties. He just looked at her. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. He opened the banking app slowly, like he already knew what was in it. He turned the screen toward me. The joint account balance. The withdrawals still sitting there in the transaction history like a fact that had not apologized for itself. "I can transfer it back today," he said. I looked at the screen. I did not touch the phone. "That's not the point," I said quietly. "I know," he said. And I believed him when he said it. Something in my chest went quiet at that, the way a room goes quiet after a door finally closes. He did know. He had known at the airport. He had known on the plane. He had known somewhere in himself the whole time, and knowing had not been enough to change what he did. I had prepared 3 things to say at that moment, and I had rehearsed none of them. They were simply the true things, arranged in the order they needed to be said. "You handed your mother's comfort more weight than my safety," I said. "Not once, every time there was a choice." I looked at Clara asleep in her carrier on the kitchen table. "She'll grow up knowing what her father chose," I said. "And what her mother did with that information." I set my hand flat on the kitchen table. "I'm going to be fine," I said. That part 1 was right about. He left an hour later. Not to Cancun. Just out. That was 14 months ago. Clara takes her first steps the same way she sleeps, with the extremely serious expression that is entirely her own and entirely my grandmother's. She is walking now along the furniture, one hand trailing the edge of the couch, then the coffee table, then the side of my father's crib, which I moved into the living room when she outgrew sleeping in it so that it could be something she touches every day. The house on Ferris Court is mine outright again, as of 63 days ago. The settlement was quiet and civil and took most of a year. My attorney had been methodical and unhurried, and the original deed had said what it said, and the equity records had said what they said, and eventually everything settled back into its accurate shape. Marcus has called twice since the paperwork was final. Not to dispute anything, those calls, to his credit, were about Clara. He is figuring out, slowly, what kind of father he wants to be, and that is his work to do, not mine to manage. Diane called once. She left a voicemail. I listened to it once, standing at the kitchen window, and then I did not call back. There was nothing in it that required an answer, only a request for one, and those two things are not the same. I run 3 mornings a week now, early, before Clara wakes. I come back and stand on the porch and drink my coffee in the cold and look at the 3rd step, which still has its soft spot, which I will fix eventually but have not needed to fix yet. Some things are yours before anyone else arrives. The work is just learning to act like it. My father's crib stands in the corner of the living room, the pencil lines still visible on the inside rail. Clara puts her hand on it every morning when she wakes up, and so do I. If you know someone who needed to hear that what was built before they arrived is still yours, share this. You never know who's sitting with that question right now. You called this meeting, I said, already knowing what you thought I was. A broke designer with nowhere to go. That's a quote, Lorraine. Derek told me what you said. She looked at Derek. He looked at the floor. You told me I was ungrateful, I said. That I'd been given a home. That I couldn't cope. I let that sit for one breath. I built that home. I designed it, I financed it, and 14 months ago I became its sole owner in a legal transaction that everyone in this room except you knew about. I looked at the county seal on the transfer sheet. What you offered me tonight wasn't generosity. It was the price you thought I was worth. I picked up the phone. I picked up the envelope. I stood up. I'll have my attorney contact yours about next steps, I said. Regarding Derek, regarding the girls, regarding the schedule going forward. Everything through counsel from here. I buttoned my coat. I walked out. 6 months passed the way recovery months do. Not quickly, not dramatically, just incrementally and with evidence. I was in the house on Crestline Avenue. I had always been in the house on Crestline Avenue, and I stayed in it, and I refinished the spare room that had been the nursery annex into a proper home office for Voss Studio, and I worked, and the girls grew, and the firm took on 2 new clients in the spring. The county-stamped envelope lived in a hanging file in the 2nd drawer of the oak filing cabinet I had bought second-hand and sanded down myself the previous autumn. One of those tasks I had done on a quiet Saturday with the twins in the bouncer seats beside me, the sander loud enough to make them startle and then settle. I ran my hand across the top of the cabinet sometimes when I passed it. Not for sentiment. Just because it was there and it was mine and I had made it what it was. Lorraine reached out once. It was a text 5 weeks after the meeting and it said, I hope the girls are well. I think about them. I read it. I set my phone face down on the counter. I did not reply. Derek and I had begun the legal process with very little noise. He was cooperating. He was, in the way that he had always been, easy, not adequate but easy, and I did not hate him for it. The custody arrangement for the girls was taking shape in a way I could work with, and that was what mattered. The studio had its best revenue quarter in 3 years that spring. I hired a part-time project coordinator named Sasha, who turned out to be meticulous and fast, and who did not need to be told anything twice. The house hummed in the way that houses do when the people inside them stop waiting for permission. I think about that night on the porch sometimes. The door slamming. The knocker swinging. What I have come to understand is this: the people who decide what you are worth without ever asking you what you have built will always be surprised by the answer. That surprise is not your problem to manage. Your only job is to know the number. The twins were 7 months old the last time I opened that filing cabinet. They were in the bouncer seats again, watching me from across the room. The elder one, Petra, who has Derek's exact brow, was chewing on the corner of a board book and watching my hands. I pulled out the county envelope. I held it for a moment, that softened crease, the notary seal still sharp against my thumb. I filed it back. If any of this felt familiar, if you have ever been dismissed by someone who never bothered to ask what you had built, share this with someone who needs to hear it.